Hi, good morning. Thanks so much for being here. This morning, my good friend Aimee Parkinson, if you go to church here, you probably know her other half, Ben Parkinson. You also know her mother-in-law, Ann Parkinson. Lots of Parkinsons around here to know and love. And so welcome, Aimee, this morning. We're so glad to have you here. I'm going to give you just a little chance to kind of introduce yourself and your family to us. Tell us how long you and Ben have been married and whatever else you want to tell us about yourself.
Well, Ben and I started dating in high school, so we dated for 6 years. And we've been married, it'll be 25 in June. So we've been together a long time. We've kind of grown up together.
Yeah, I think we have a picture of your family.
This is my beautiful family. I have 3 daughters in 3 years, so can relate to some of you moms. It was a crazy season. I had a really crazy season.
Yeah, I don't remember much of it if you're like me. Yeah.
I just kept I remember being embarrassed. I was like, come on, Mom, like, I'm pregnant again. I'm sorry. This is a lot. I know. Anyway, so yeah, I've got Abigail, who's 21, Anna is 20, and then Allie is 18. And so she's a senior. So I'm about to be empty nester as well. But yes, so been married a long time.
Yes.
Dated a long time. So.
Yes. I've known Aimee for, let's not start. I don't want to count up years. Ben and Chuck actually grew up together, and so he and Ben have been friends for a very long time. And then some of our girls are really best friends, and so we've had the pleasure of really just becoming great friends over the years. And I'm sure you'll hear more about that as we go. But I think we also have a wedding picture of you guys.
We were babies. I look at that. I'm like, why did they let us get married? We were like so young.
Yes, so young. So 25 years.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you our question that we start out our series with, and that is, if you could go back to that young newlywed, naive
22-year-old
self,
and
give her some advice, what would you tell her?
Yeah. We talked about this, and there's so many things I would say, but I really, it's fun getting older, believe it or not, it kind of is. I would say to really work on believing the best about your husband and just really looking for ways not to sweat the small things and just finding ways to believe the best. It's so much better. So.
Yeah, because we don't naturally tend towards that. So tell us a little bit more what you mean by that, what that looks like in real life for you guys.
Mm-hmm. I would say, I think as life goes on, as we move on, it just gets more complicated. When you're first dating, you think they're the best person in the world, and you see everything through this lens of just how amazing they are and how blessed you are to be with them. And then as life gets complicated with kids or moving, sick parents, just all the things that come, there's so many ways, I think, as you're struggling personally, and you're sharing a life with somebody, to change that grid and really believe the worst about them or be in a place where you're assuming motives on them that maybe aren't there. I know with me, whenever I'm just stressed, and I can always a little litmus test for me is every once in a while I'll be like, Ben is not my enemy. I don't know if you've ever thought that, but you're just, you're going through a season and you're just mad at them, or, they didn't pick up the dishes and it's because they don't respect you, they don't care about anything you do. You just kind of get all these things in your head that aren't really fair. And there might be an iota of truth in there, but we can get a grid that we're looking at them as in a real negative way. So.
Yeah, I can tend to do that. My red flag is when I start feeling like I'm the only one who ever does anything around here. Everybody just assumes that I'm their maid. And so there's a speaker out of the Nashville area, Beth McCord, and she terms that assume-a-side. And I think that's a great word.
Term. You said, I was like, that's the best. I love that.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And so, because that's what we tend to do, we assume people's motives are negative and that they're out to get us and that they really just want to punish us. And so we commit a suicide. And I think that is a great word. So I want to kind of put a little caveat on the morning, and really you're the one that brought this up, but to say that most of what we're talking about is within the bounds of relatively healthy relationship.
Yes, I meant to say that because I remember I was in bloom when I was young, and there's certain times when I'm saying believing the best, I'm not talking about if your husband is having extramarital affairs, or if there's something illegal going on, if there's abuse. Those are not the things I'm saying to overlook at all, because those are things I would say you need to find some help. And I really do believe that God blesses putting work into your marriage, and there are resources and counselors and things but there's certain situations that this is not applicable to. There might be things that are applicable to parts of your relationship, but not that. And so, and obviously, Carrie, there's places we can point you if that's something that you're dealing with. But.
Right. I don't want anybody to leave here today thinking that we're saying you just need to believe the best and always extend grace.
Yes, exactly. There are certain things that are dangerous for you in your marriage that need to be dealt with directly, and this is not. Yeah. This is more normal things. Yeah.
So as we talk about how to believe the best, and kind of what you were saying with life, just it gets busy, it gets complicated. We tend to sort of just keep pushing through, and so kind of talking about how do we actually do that? How do we actually believe the best?
Right.
And one of the things that you brought up as we were talking was even the verse out of Proverbs 5:18 says, "May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth." And so one of the things that you brought up was just remembering why you got married,
right?
Being thankful. So let's talk a little bit more about that and what that looks like. And
I think, and it's funny, we see that all over Scripture, just with God, with the Israelites saying, looking back and remembering the things He had done for them. So I think at times when I'm believing all of a sudden Ben is out to get me and he's my enemy, and we get these false narratives in our head, I really do stop and think about the reasons I fell in love with him, who he was, why I was so excited to marry him, and just thinking through all the wonderful things he has done for me throughout our marriage. There have been hard things, but there's been so many amazing things, for sure. So that's a great way for me just to really remember just falling in love and getting married, or even looking at those wedding pictures. You're just like, oh my goodness. I just couldn't have been more excited. I look at our wedding video, and I was like, literally like, it's the most spastic, sad wedding ceremony you've ever seen. Like, I was just like up there rocking and so excited and embarrassed for myself when I look at it. But it's just, I was so happy. And he does have so many amazing qualities, and to really focus on that more. So it is a discipline. We talked about this too, like having to train yourself to believe the best. It's not, like you were saying, it's not a natural inclination at all.
Chuck and I were actually having just that conversation the other day of a lot of us are naturally wired to be a little more prone to that assume-a-side, to be a little more worried that everything that happens to us or in our relationships is personal. And he and I were talking just about, could we actually kind of train our brains to overcome that wiring? And instead of our first thought being negative about the situation, could we say, okay, I'm going to choose to believe that this is not about me, that he's stressed, or that something else is going on, or that he's not intending to hurt my feelings or offend me. And I think thankfulness is a big part of that.
It's huge. And I really think, and this goes to all relationships. I think your husband is typically the one we're the most, obviously, one with. But with my kids, with my friendships, if you're ever getting to a place where that person is your enemy or out to get you, you probably need to check yourself, because, but I think really praying for my husband, first of all, is the hugest thing, because I think it makes I'm praying for him, which just is hard to be. It changes your thought process, how you're thinking him. You're looking at him through a godly grid, how God sees them. And then second of all, just like you're having a thankful moment. In the mornings, I really am trying to get up and just be thankful for, even in hard seasons, there's always something amazing or great. And looking at them that way and being thankful for that they have a job, that they're providing, that they're going to the baseball game or whatever it is. I mean, that you'd be thankful for those things, because there's always something to be there for. And then my other thing, I think, within that, to not do the assume-a-side, is really to ask some qualifying questions, because we get locked in our head, and like I said, then you look at this grid. This grid is now, they don't appreciate me, and they don't care about me, and if they are being short or whatever, I might say, hey, I've noticed you're really short. Did I do anything, or is there something, are you upset with me or the kids? And 90% of the time, it's, oh my goodness, no, I had a really hard day at work, or I'm really consumed with this, or, my mind is somewhere else. I'm sorry. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So that kind of gets us into talking a little bit more about communication.
Yes.
Which is a huge part of this, and it's a huge part of avoiding that assume-aside.
Right.
It's a huge part of believing the best is kind of where it starts. But let's just talk a little bit about communicating and the importance of that, and maybe any practical ideas or things that you and Ben do or have done
right.
to improve your communication.
Yes, for sure. I think when we do premarital counseling with couples, one of the things we talk about this is you can make believing the best so easy or so hard based on communication. And I think for kind of a lot of y'all's phase, one example would be when we had those 3 kids in 3 years. Well, we had 2 of them while Ben was in seminary. So he was in seminary in Denton, and I, at that point, was home all the time, but he was working full time, and it was a 45 to an hour and a half commute, and he was taking a full load. So when I say he was busy, I mean he was busy, and I had these little babies and didn't have any help, and or family in town, or money for help. So I could really easily feel sorry for myself and see him going to seminary is like all the freedom he had. He's like killing himself taking Greek and Hebrew, and I'm like,
yeah, because you get to leave the house.
Yeah, you're always out and just having fun all the time, and I'm sitting here bathing people, or nursing them or whatever, and so I would get, it could go real, and I was tired, which is always a bad, thing. When you're tired, you always think crazier. But when we started doing weekly meetings, which I would say is a good thing, and I would look at his week and I would think, oh my goodness, I don't want that week. Like, that's terrible. He has 5 papers due, and and has to meet with this person and speak at College Life, and he's trying to help me as much as he can. And I would see his schedule and think, oh my goodness, I need to be praying for him. Or when he would come home at 10, instead of me being angry that I had done the whole night by myself, I would have compassion on him and check on him. Do you mean it was just so different? And when I wasn't aware of his schedule, I, in my mind, had it all. He was having fun and I was home being the martyr. And it flipped that. And then eventually I started asking him how he was feeling. And then it helped me to know how to pray for him, and it let us get through a really hard season. It was going south quick, and I think we really quickly realized we needed to start talking, and I needed to start hearing he wanted to be home with me. Like, he was sad to not be home with me. And in my mind, I thought he was happy to be gone from all the chaos of our house with little kids.
Yeah, like it's a break. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about that, a weekly meeting, and kind of what that looked like, because I think there's a lot of even that factual communication of here's what's on my plate for the week.
Yes.
It does a lot of things. It gives you a lot of confidence in what he actually is doing and how he's spending his time, but it also sets some expectations
of how much you're going to see him that week.
Yeah, how much you're going to see him, what all he has going on, both just in his actual physical schedule, but also mentally. So tell us a little bit more about what would a weekly meeting look like?
How that actual logistics of it. Yeah, what we did, and we actually just talked, we've gotten away from that, but we were just talking about it now, like we needed to get back to it. So we would do it on Sunday nights, and we would just get the calendar out, and I would write down all his stuff, and he would write down all my stuff of what we were doing, and it helped me. I would look back at that calendar when he was on a Wednesday and think, oh my goodness, this is the day he had all of his meetings. So I knew how to pray for him, and same with, he would also know for me just what I was doing. So that sounds very simple. It wasn't anything really, amazing, but it made a huge, huge difference for our for me to even know how to communicate with him in that week, and like you said, just to manage my expectations of when I was going to see him or if I was going to see him, and
Yeah. Okay. So as you can see from the babies in the room, and we have a lot of moms with young children.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking back to when my kids were that age, and I was staying at home with them. And if we had a weekly meeting on Sunday night, me and Chuck, he would have laid out like all of these things, an agenda, and I would have said,
I don't have one.
I'm like, I'll be here.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're all still alive.
I might shower on Tuesday. There's a good chance I'm going to shower on Tuesday, but that's all I got.
Yeah.
So, you're like,
yeah. And so I think there's, at the beginning of that conversation, in my mind, there's a hesitancy and almost a, I don't know if guilt is quite the right word. I mean, this is going to be a strong word, but there's almost a feeling of shame. And
you being the one that has the lack of stuff going on, or
yes, but I also remember Chuck coming home at night and him saying, "Hey, what'd y'all do today?"
Yeah. I know, yeah. We lived. We are live. We are live.
And I would say, I don't know. Yeah. All I know is I haven't sat down all day.
Yeah.
And so I had to, like, he learned to not ask the question of what did y'all do, but more like, how was your day? That's a much better question to a mom. So I think what I'm...
That's a good point.
What I'm saying is that that weekly meeting is... It's a great time to get those factual things out, but it's also a great time if you are a stay-at-home mom, or if you're just a working mom and you're busy, to kind of say, okay, where are some pockets that we could schedule some things that are life-giving?
Yes, that's a great point.
For you as a mom, but also for you as a couple.
Yes, to even have some conversations. Like, I remember at first when he was so busy, we would have to schedule times to even have conversations about what we were doing, because his schedule was so full, and mine was very flexible, like you said. But I think even in those meetings or those moments, it might be the time for you to say, I'm really overwhelmed, or I feel really lonely, or I feel very inadequate, or is this all there is? I mean, all the things you feel as a young mom, it might be good to let him know some of those thoughts too, because if he doesn't know, he thinks you're great. And then your feelings are hurt because he doesn't know to even be checking in, or even say, I need a moment with you. Like, I need a date night, or I need a moment that we're going to sit down without the kids after dinner and connect, So those are, I think, good thoughts with that too.
Yeah. So what else have you guys learned over the years about communication and just knowing each other better?
Yeah. We had a little talk about this too. I think it's such a privilege to, like, I think when you get married, or when before you're married, we all want to be known, which I think obviously the Lord is the one that we need to get that validation from the Lord. That a person can't do that. A friend or a husband, children, none of that. That's where ultimately we're known. But within that, we're relational beings, and we really want to be fully known. And it is such a privilege to really know somebody and to really have them know you. But it's a weighty privilege, and it could be the biggest blessing, or it could be the most hurtful thing on the planet. And that's why I think that marriage relationship is so intense, because you're knowing each other, everything about each other, the goods and the bad. So this is the one thing I would say, like, when we're talking about remembering who you fell in love with, usually the thing you fell in love with is probably the thing you're going to hate the most. Not hate, but hate's a strong word, but it's going to drive you the most crazy too, because their strengths or their weaknesses. And I think the longer life goes on in different seasons, that'll play out differently. You'll see that thing you loved is the thing that's the hardest, for sure. Like, I always think, like, Ben, he is the most fun person on the planet. Like, he really is. But he is so stressful. Like, because he's just like, I still, like, we went skiing. I haven't skied ever, and we went skiing for the first time, and he hadn't skied in 30 years. And I knew like, you're just like, there's no way he's going to be able to avoid doing that black. I mean, you just know, I just know him. I'm like, and we'll probably be in the emergency room. Like, I just know him, and I love that about him. That used to be the best thing ever. Now I'm like, please do not break your femur, because we don't have time for this. Allie's graduating, we all this, but I just know, I know him so well. That's just kind of part of who he is, and he's super particular. Like, he's the brightest person I know. That's why he's a great teacher for your fellowship. He knows his Bible. He studies his Bible. He remembers everything. Well, do not take the man shopping for a mattress. Like, he will research for 3 weeks and have every bit of information. I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, really? And they're like, do you work in the mattress business? And I'm like, no. He's just like the most, like, thorough person ever. And I'm just like, really? Like, why are you talking about, like, stop talking about coils or whatever, whatever it is. But at the same time, I'm learning to flip. This is one of the big takeaways I'm saying about believing the best. To be amused. I used to be amused by him, and I think as life goes on, you can be irritated by who they are, and to really choose to be more amused by them, because it's like when Benny first did it, I'd be embarrassed because I was young, and I'd be like, this is so embarrassing. Like, I mean, literally, y'all, if we bought a microwave, a car, I mean, I would be like, oh my goodness, like, how much information do you have? And now I'm like so entertained by it. I'm like, ooh, I know in my mind, I'll think, you just wake, salesman, like, coming up, I'm like, this is gonna be so good. Like, he's gonna kill him, because he knows way more than they do. I'm like, go get the manager. Oh, the manager's coming. I know this is coming. I just kind of in my mind am playing all this out because it's funny because I know him so well. Or we'll be in, whatever it is with the girls, like, they'll ask a question and I'll think, oh, there's no way he can't lecture. He's gonna lecture. Oh, here we go. And it just comes and, it's just coming and it's gonna be 45 minutes. And I'm like checking it. I was right, because I just know him and, it's kind of, yeah.
And so I mean, you're talking about perspective.
Yes.
On those things.
Yes.
And I think that is huge, and it's remembering that his heart is to buy a mattress that you guys are both going to love and enjoy.
Yes.
Like, his heart is not to belabor the issue, or like, his heart is for your good.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we forget that.
Yes, 1,000%. And so there's ways, I think when we know them like that, you can also use that. You can hurt them so much too, because it's like their weak spots. And so I feel like that's another thing, is just looking at the privilege of being that person's soulmate. And being responsible with that, because we could so easily hurt them. Or if they ever do, when you're asking for communication and wanting to know what they're really thinking or how they're feeling, you can't use that against them. If they let you know that they're feeling insecure at work and you're in a fight and you say something like, well, if we just had more money, or, what I mean? Like, if you know that hurts them, like, we have to be responsible with that privilege of knowing that information too, which I think is it's a gift, and I, like I said, I look at it that way, and I try to. And then there's times I totally mess up, and I think we need to acknowledge that when we do, and be like, that was cruel. I'm sorry. I was feeling insecure. Or I was angry, or
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think that, like you said, knowing someone is a huge responsibility,
right.
And we can use that knowledge lovingly, or we can use it kind of as a weapon.
Right.
But also, we want to be known. I was listening to a psychiatrist the other day, and he said we're all born, when we come into the world, we are looking for someone who's looking for us. I was like, ooh, we're looking for someone who's looking for us. And so we want our husbands to be a safe place for us, and for us to be known and to be vulnerable. And we need to be a safe place for him as well. So are there ways that you and Ben have kind of set up a safe space for each other, or do you have kind of, rules of what you say, whether it's to each other or what you share with other people, or Amy's always our rules person that our group of friends
I don't know
consults.
how I got that. That's bizarre. That's my role.
So we'll have her back for parenting sometime and talk about rules. But are there any things like that you and Ben would say, hey, we won't do this, or we're sure to do this, to try to create kind of that safe space for each other?
Right. Well, the first thing I would say, this is not a rule, but I think that anytime you go into being intimate like that with your husband, about communication-wise, it's just to constantly remind yourself that you're a sinner and you need grace. Like, I need as much grace as Ben does, and my sin struggles are just as bad as his are, no matter, even if they're different. Like, I'm also in need of grace and want grace from him, so I need to be willing to look at myself and come to that humbly, as opposed to coming in thinking, I'm right, he's wrong, I'm going to make him pay, or whatever that is. So that's, I think, the first thing, is just coming in humbly and looking at yourself as also being in need of grace and being hard. Like, I mean, it's easy to think we're easy, and none of us are. I mean, nobody is easy. And I have to remind myself of that. With the safe space, I would definitely say it would be not like we were saying before, like not using information that you get and using it against them. And if you do, quickly acknowledging that, because that's hurtful, and it can really, and we've all had it done to us, and we've all done it. And then with sharing, I think you never want to be secretive about a part of yourself with your husband, but doesn't mean you share. You have to look at your spouse and who they are and what the sin struggle is, or what the problem is, or what the emotion is, to how much you share. I think you don't want to hold a secretive part of yourself, but you don't always need to tell them if it's you're being disappointed in how they're providing, or or maybe that's the issue you're dealing with that's skewing your viewpoint. You don't need to tell them everything about that. Like, that's hurtful. They might need to know that you're struggling or with contentment, but you might need to tell them every little detail about what that means. But you might have a good girlfriend that you would do that with, a safe person. And even in that, like you were saying, rules, I would say I'm very picky about who I share negative information about Ben with, because first of all, I mean, just because I think that's respectful for any wife, but also he's people's pastor. Like, I have to be careful, just because, it's different, I think, and not that there's a lot of negatives to share, but we all have issues. So I pick some really safe people that I know love me and are safe before I just share negatives about my marriage. But you can share, there's just different levels of, you can share and be known, but then the details of that might be for a specific safe person, and not always your husband, depending on what it is, but.
Yeah, I think
that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm getting what you're saying, and I think there's a good guideline there of not withholding something, but maybe not dumping every detail.
Yes.
Depending on what it is, depending on the situation. I think that is a good guideline, and I think going back to a little bit what we were talking about earlier about thankfulness, and we talked about this a little bit last week with Gina Brown being here, because she talked with us about not making your husband an idol.
Okay.
And I think that we've always got to remember, who are we looking to for our satisfaction, and who are we really looking to meet our needs. And there are needs that we get from our husband, but one of the keys to believing the best, I think, is keeping him in the right place.
Exactly.
And keeping God in the right place. And so,
because if that's the case, you're living above your circumstances. So you don't have to have them behave a certain way to enjoy life or to feel contentment.
Okay, explain that sentence a little more. Living above your circumstances. What do you mean by that? Because I think I know, but
yeah, I would say when I'm really finding my self-worth and identity in the Lord, and trusting that He's got a plan for me, that He's in control, that He's going to work things out to my good, whatever that is. I'm not dependent on Ben's response to everything he does. I'm not angry when things aren't going exactly the way I want them to go, because that's not where I'm finding my joy. It doesn't mean it's not easy, but I remember that I had one of my daughters really struggling when she first went to college, and it like tanked me. And Ben and I had a lot of talks about that, and I was like, I'm going to have to learn to not have this situation control every aspect of my joy, my spiritual life, my life with my friends, my life with the rest of my family. And my husband definitely goes there because they're your most intimate person. So I think when you're up here, your perspective again is you can see them with a Christ-like perspective as opposed to being hurt by every little moment. Or I'm kind of rambling.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. It changes things, and not everything your husband does or doesn't do, that's not like the end-all, be-all of your life. Yes. You have like you said, you're above those circumstances. You have a better perspective and a bigger picture of things. Okay, well, as we kind of begin to wrap this up and close, what would be any other thoughts that you have that you want to share with us, or a takeaway that you would want us to remember as we leave here today?
Right. Well, I always say, like, the thing when I'm looking back at my younger self, and you can't change. I mean, like, all the things happen for reasons, and different seasons happen for reasons. But I think I would say life is going to throw curveballs at you. You're going to have hard things. Like, there's just no way to avoid that. So I look back and I'm like, I made some things hard that weren't hard. You know, like, I just feel like I kind of made some of my early childhood kids, when my kids were little and things, I made things, I assumed motives on Ben, believed false narratives, got myself all worked up, and wasted a lot of time. And then when the real hard things come, you're like, oh goodness, like, your perspective, you're like, why did I put so much energy into that? So obviously it's easier looking back to have those, to realize those things. But like Karen said, anytime you can choose to believe the best and choose to be not irritated but amused by your, husband's just all the little parts of the personalities that are goofy or annoying, or they snore, or that they pick their nail, I don't know, whatever it is, like, if you can kind of just learn to let those things roll off your back and be amused by them, there's so much life to live, and there's so much, like, just always say, like, marinate in the good. Like, when things are, like, just enjoy it and roll around it and have fun. And that's easier said than done, because I know life is complicated, but as much as you can, and the Bible said that too, like, live in peace. And when the hard things come, you'll have more energy for them. I just created hard, I think, when I was young, when I was first married. I look back, I'm like, oh, poor blessed Ben's hard. I was a little dramatic, so I was like, yeah.
Well, Aimee, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you and all that God has taught you, and I appreciate you and Ben and the time and energy that you invest here and into the people of fellowship and our community. So thanks for being here today. I'd love to pray for us, and then we'll be dismissed this morning. God, thank you for my friend Aimee, and I just thank you for all the things that you have taught her, and I thank you for the things you've taught us this morning through her and through her experience and the marriage that she and Ben have together. I just pray for each one of us in this room. Would you write these things in our heart? Would you help us to have an eternal perspective that does rise above our circumstances, that rises above our preferences and our annoyances and even our conflicts that are just. And I just pray that you would bind us together in our marriages to each other and to you. And would you just help us to grow closer in love for each other and closer in love for you, God? We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.